In response to
Okay, so we want to just have a little bit of discussion after that incredible talk, which I'm still absorbing. I'm sure you are too. With three panelists, and I'll just tell you who they all are. This is to my left, Ivan Maluski, who is a resident of rural Lynn County, and I don't need to read the whole thing. And with Friends of Family Farmers. And you, for some of you who have been around the conference for the last day and a half, you have been in contact with Ivan. And he recently got appointed to a task force established by the governor to look at genetically engineered crops in the state. So we'll see how that goes. We're looking forward to hearing about all your good work on that. Kim Leval is the executive director of NCAP. You all know her since 2009, and she knew Fred from her work earlier on in the Midwest. So that the connections here, as Fred mentioned when he started, go pretty deep with a lot of folks in the room here. And then Pete Sorenson, who's also been around the conference for the last day and a half, is an attorney at law, and he currently devotes his practice almost entirely to civil litigation, including environmental law, has a long background in politics and working on various laws like the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and looking at the Right to Farm Act. So we've got a real good mix of folks to bring some of the local perspective to what Fred has sort of challenged us with, and raised a lot of hope, I think, is in that commentary as well. So we'll start with Ivan, and if that makes sense. You want to come up here? Okay. Thank you.
Are we going up there, or are we just?
I'll stay down here. This is more of a discussion, but well, it's a little hard to follow in Fred's shoes, so I'll kind of keep it brief, but hopefully we can have a good discussion up here. There's some really good points were raised. I work for an organization here in Oregon, Friends of Family Farmers, which works to assist socially responsible farmers and ranchers in having successful businesses and really doing things a different way on the ground here in the state of Oregon. And I think there is a lot to be hopeful about as we kind of look at some of the challenges of industrial agriculture. And I'm going to tell you something that's not going to sound very hopeful at first, but I hope you'll agree it ultimately is. As I was driving up here today, I saw a billboard. It was a McDonald's billboard, and it had they were advertising their new burger, and it said "Foodies Welcome," and I had to laugh because it's obviously ridiculous, but it tells you something about a cultural shift that's going on, that more and more people are becoming very conscious and asking the right kinds of questions about where their food's coming from, how it's produced, who's producing it, what the ecological connection is, what the labor connection is, what its nutrition is like, and all these types of things. And I think that we've all seen that happening you see more and more large industrial businesses advertising their natural or their local connection, or in this case, McDonald's talking about their welcoming foodies. But so in an interesting way, I think that tells you something positive is happening in our general consciousness here in the United States. And there's some hopeful stories. One of the big issues we worked on this past year, and if you were at the panel earlier today I talked about it, so I'll just touch on it briefly. But here in the state of Oregon, we produce a lot of the vegetable seed that is used by home gardeners, farmers, all around the world, not just here in Oregon, not just the United States, but really all around the world in Europe and Asia. We have a vibrant specialty seed industry, and it faced a real threat this past year from a new rule that was being promulgated at the state level to allow canola into the Willamette Valley. And canola is the same family as a lot of your broccolis, chards, kales, and this sort of thing. We kind of had a slogan, "Save the Kales." And it was really about, how do we kind of keep this robust, diverse vegetable seed production system in place. And we had just an extraordinary coalition formed. It was small farm groups. It was seed growers. It was organic advocates. It was folks that grow conventional vegetable crops, environmental groups. And we were able to turn back both in the courts but also before our legislature, this new rule and ultimately enshrine for at least another 5 years a very solid moratorium on the commercial cultivation of canola in the Willamette Valley. And this was significant. It wasn't only because there were issues. A lot of, as I'm sure many of you well know, a lot of the canola out there is herbicide resistant, genetically engineered. But there were broader issues with canola in terms of being able to provide seed purity, even if it was not GMO. There were real concerns around seed purity from a plant that could so readily cross-pollinate. So this coalition that formed had a powerful impact, and we were able to break through party lines. I think that if the issue had been merely organic versus the world, I don't think we would have gotten there. I think we really needed that broad base. And I think it was so powerful that I'm not sure that everyone who was involved necessarily even realizes what it took. We had organic food consumers and producers talking to their sympathetic legislators. We had folks that use a lot of herbicides and want to make sure that they're going to work on the weeds, talking to their legislators. But ultimately, we came to the same place, and we had a positive impact. So just to kind of wrap it up, I feel like there's some really key things happening, and I think that if we're going to make a shift, I think we really need to concentrate on how we prepare for some of the changes that are coming, as Fred noted. We've got to build and support a strong local food system. Certainly, there's going to be people that export products. That's going to happen, but I think in the future, we're going to have to see that food production and consumption is going to have to be more regional in nature. You're going to have to think about how far does food have to travel? Where did your seeds come from? And I think that's going to become ever more important. It's going to become economic necessity at some point. But the sooner that we can build those local food systems, I think the more well-prepared we'll be. We've got to have diversity in the markets. We can't just have agriculture based on one simple or two simple crops that are part of rotation. We've really got to diversify and try to provide as much as we can in our local regions as possible. In order to do that, we need to incentivize, whether financially or otherwise, conservation for farmers to conserve natural resources, to plant cover crops, to protect stream sides, to use fewer inputs. We've got to incentivize diversity on the farm, including biodiversity. And some of the programs that were touched on with the Natural Resource Conservation Service are really very important. But there's things happening at the Soil and Water Conservation District level locally. There's a number of federal programs that I think we need to grow over time. And lastly, we need to tackle this issue of an aging farmer population and really take a look at how are we going to transition the next generation of family farmers to be able to be successful. And so we've got to incentivize, beginning farmer training, young farmers being successful. And so this is something that we can do with our own pocketbooks as we support our local producers, but I think we have to make sure that we're also enacting policies at the state level, at the local level, and at the federal level. So these are all things that we can do, and I think the canola story that I started out with is emblematic, that when people band together, even if they come from different perspectives, there's a lot we actually have in common ground, and we can really make a lot of positive changes. So I'll leave it at that.
Can you hear me back in the back? Okay, great. So again, I'm Kim Leval, and I just want to start out with a story about how I formulated my ecological conscience. And it's a story that my mom told me recently. We were talking, and I said, well, how do you think I became this way? Wanting to, make environmental impacts and protect our environment and our public health. And so she told me a story about when I went with my grandfather to go swimming. I was about 4 years old, and I adored my grandfather. He actually was very influential in, my ecological schooling and learning about the natural world. So he took me swimming. I was about 4, and we come up to the lake, and there's a sign, and it says pollution. You can't go in the lake because it's polluted. So he's trying to explain this to me as a 4-year-old, and I'm asking, what is pollution? I couldn't even pronounce it. So I think that's where my ecological conscience started, according to my mom. And so I think that kind of illustrates how this work is deeply personal for all of us. I'm about to be a grandma for the second time. Our grandson, Sam, is any day now. We're expecting him. And that really drives me to do this work. And it's hard to keep up hope when that we know that there are more than 1 billion pounds of pesticides applied annually in the United States, and how can we break that billion? Break it, not to exceed it. So how do we do that? And so I think that Fred was talking about a new economics, and I think we're realizing that in moving to natural systems, that if we pay up front and not pay to clean up later, that we're investing in our natural systems and less exposures, less harms to public health in our waters, and protecting our wildlife and our pollinators. So, and we really ask the question, how do you put a value on all of our pollinators and all of the services that they provide? It's priceless. It's priceless. And the cost of losing those pollinators is unimaginable. So, I think that I'm hopeful that we're starting to realize the impacts if we don't protect our environment and our health. And I know that at NCAP, we've just seen a huge interest in bees. I think that at a fundamental gut level, people really are worried about losing our bees, our pollinators. And there's so many different kinds of pollinators, birds and bats and dragonflies and on and on. So, I think that that is hopeful. And we have, at NCAP, we use different tools. We use litigation, helping to pass state legislation, local organizing, helping communities to pass policies at a school level, a district level, we have an Oregon IPM in schools law, and we are really trying to help people to develop pesticide-free parks, communities, neighborhoods, hospitals, homes, schools. So that all adds up. And then also research and demonstration. And if some of you were here earlier, you may have heard Jade Florence speaking. She is an expert on fungi. And one of our projects that I think really sort of illustrates what Fred was talking about bringing a natural systems approach and really observing and seeing what's happening in the natural world and finding a systems approach to problems, not like a silver bullet and answer in a box kind of thing. And so we work together with farmers, Oregon State University, the Eugene Water and Electric Board, and Oregon State University, and we got funding from NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, to actually look at what was understanding mummyberry disease in blueberries at a deeper level. And there was we also discovered that there was no research at OSU, and we have one of the largest organic blueberry research, facility, farms here in Oregon, but they weren't looking at mummyberry for an organic management for mummyberry. I mean, I don't blame them because they didn't want to bring that on their farm, but it's actually very devastating to organic blueberries and conventional blueberries. So we wanted to look at, to understand what organic practices could we learn more about to prevent and manage mummyberry in the natural system. And so Jade is looking at mulching levels, timing of mulching materials, light, access to light, how deep it has to be for the mulching to help manage the disease. So I think that is so important for us to, as we move forward, to have funding for organic and sustainable agriculture, to have to push on the policy levers at USDA and EPA, and to build a system that we want to see. So as we're sort of pushing on and putting pressure on the system that's not working now, actually building that alternative pathway. And I just want to say one last thing, and that is seeds. Seeds are really important, as you can imagine. And we have had a takeover, a corporatization of our seed and access to seeds. And it's important, and you might ask, well, what does that have to do with pesticides? Well, it has a lot to do with them, actually, because as we've consolidated agriculture, we've lost the research into more locally adapted seeds, developing locally adapted varieties, and also that can help mitigate climate change. Because as climate change is happening, there are different changes in the weather, and that changes soil and a lot of other things. So I know that Michael Sly, I'm not sure if he's still here, but he's part of a seeds and breeds effort, and NCAP's part of that as well, and many other groups, the Organic Seed Alliance, and the list goes on and on, to bring back access to seeds, seed research and development, and an alternative to the GMO breeding sort of approach. And it's really important for organic because they have to use organic seed, and we're losing the capacity. So that's another important point I wanted to make, and something that we have to look at for the future. Thank you.
Well, first of all, on behalf of all Oregonians, I want to remind Nichelle and others that are here that it rains every day in Oregon. So when you go home, please tell everybody it rains every day in Oregon, because we have plenty of Oregonians already. So remember, it rains every day in Oregon. Second, I would be remiss if I didn't quote Shakespeare to say, as the lawyer up here, first thing, let's kill all the lawyers. But I want to say there should be an exception for that, because there's so many great people here of all kinds of backgrounds, lawyers included, that I just wanted to thank everyone for your role in the movement. As far as a more formal response to Fred's talk, I say, first of all, when he was introduced, and clearly from his talk, you are a visionary. I hope you keep flying and talking and writing and keep going, because the movement needs visionaries and people that think deeply and read widely and are in touch with a wide array of these disciplines and are cross-disciplinary. I also think that during this conference we have, had these really depressing presentations about farm worker health and pollinator collapse, poison food, water, and land, and the peril of rapid and negative climate change. So it takes me a little bit to get going with the hope message there, but because I've been through now in politics, we had Jesse Jackson, keep hope alive, Bill Clinton, the man from hope, and then finally President Obama, hope. So I'm a little wary of that term, having voted for all those people myself. And I also want to say that from a legal perspective, I think they put me up here to mention that these 5-4 decisions you've been hearing about, the class action denial, the voting rights denial, the idea that the wealthier you are, the more power you should have in a democratic society. I want to turn it to a positive and turn it to hope, and that is, remember, those were all 5-4 decisions. They were not 9-0 decisions. They were 5-4 decisions. And the next president will probably decide whether those become 5-4 the other way or 6-3. So I want to give some hope that the political process, in fact, can lead us to some optimism and hope. But to me, one of the more insightful things was it's not just working for the change, it's preparing for the change. That's what Fred said, prepare for the change that's coming. And so we need to use all the tools that are out there in this toolbox that we have. We have media, we have lobbying, we have consumer action and behavior in selecting the right kind of food that we're going to buy. Yes, I'd be remiss to say we also have politics and candidates that we need to get the best of that group as possible. And yes, I think George Kimbrell said this in his talk, we need that strategic litigation at times to move things forward. So all in all, I have to say there's a lot of evidence against hope. Okay, so, you know, the blind lady that's like weighing the thing, there's a lot of evidence against hope. But I think ultimately the hope is that we will be preparing for that change. It will come, and we need to just do the very best we can to prepare for it and get on with our task.
Should we take questions? Do you have it?
Well, in the interest of generating more hope, let me give two other examples that I didn't have time to do. And one of them is...
Jury's already retired.
One of them is I run into this primarily through my association with the Stone Barn Center out of New York, but I also meet them throughout throughout the country, and that is we now have a new generation of young people. They're primarily in that late teens to early 30s age group, and I don't want to over-romanticize this, and I would love to see somebody to do a survey sometime and find out exactly what percentage of our young people are a part of this new generation. But they are not interested in consumption. They're not interested in a lot of financial wealth and material wealth. They're interested in quality of life. Pardon? Yes, right. Yeah, yeah. And they many of them want to farm, and they don't want to do commodity farming. They want to raise food for people, and they want that relationship with people. And of course, they have also challenges. They need access to land, they need access to affordable capital, they need access to the kind of markets that can give them the kind of return to pay off their investment eventually and have a decent life. That's really all they want. But I know so many of these young people, and I cannot imagine any of them. And some of them have, young children. A couple of one in particular that's a very close friend of mine. They have two young boys, 3 years old and 5 years old. They would no more think of taking them to a shopping mall for a good experience. They take them out to the garden. And when you see these two boys out in the garden with their hands in the soil and these big smiles on their faces, there's a quality of life there for them. And that gives me a lot of inspiration. And I remember the first history course I took was when I was a sophomore in high school, and the history teacher couldn't be more than 25 years old. He was a young guy, and he got up in front of us and he said, "I want you to know that only 20% of the American colonists were in favor of the American Revolution." And he said, "The reason I want you to know that is the reason to study history is to learn from the past and apply it to your own, to your own situation." And so he said, if you really want to become a part of some movement to bring about significant change in your own life, in your own time, you don't need 100%, you only need 20%. And that's an important lesson. So there's another bit of hopefulness there. So.
Let's have the questions.
I want to make a hopeful comment, and then I have a question for you. So I just want to share with you all that last year, Moms Across America invited people to join into 4th of July parades to let everybody know about GMOs and consequently pesticides. And 172 moms from 44 states joined into parades and let millions of people know in a family-friendly, fun, and festive way. And in one parade, if there's 3 people deep, for 3 miles, you can reach 49,000 people in 2 hours. So you could let your whole town know about pesticides, about GMOs, about supporting family farmers, whatever that is. So I just invite you to get involved in whatever way you can in your neighborhood, because to me that's really hopeful, that the communities are coming together, their leaders are creating leadership in areas where they never would have before. And I want to thank you, Kim, because you said in the beginning we're not alone. And I knew it, but now I really know we're not alone. The leaders in this room, we could sit down at any table and have phenomenal conversation and partnership. And I just think it's really awesome, so I want to thank all of you for organizing all of this. And I just want to ask one other question for us to sort of ponder, because Gandhi stood before the British Parliament, and the Prime Minister said to him, "Little man, do you really expect us just to hand India over to you?" And he said, "Yes." So he saw Britain as a country that would eventually do the right thing. He saw Britain as great, and that made him a great leader. So I would invite all of us in the movement to wonder, who is it that we've been villainizing, demonizing? And who is it that we could see them as great? And what kind of actions could we take to shift the paradigm, to create something new? So I'm wondering, who do you in the panel think that we could see as great and see in a new light, and what kind of actions could we take?
I could speak to that. So I think, and I said this the other day, that we have opportunities to work with our allies within the system. I sat down, and Kristen from PAN and other folks from many groups working on farm worker health and justice and children's health, a nurse association, and we were talking with these, I think it was 2 women from the Office of Children's Health within the Environmental Protection Agency. And they are allies. They want to protect children's health. They want better risk assessments. They want better monitoring. They want things banned to better protect children's health. And they are trying to get the Office of Pesticide Programs to incorporate some of their suggestions and recommendations. But there is a roadblock there. So we, NCAP, for instance, we have a member of our staff who is, we've been appointed to the Federal Advisory Board of EPA. It's called a PPDC, which is the Pesticide Program Dialogue Committee, and I know that there are other folks in the room who are on that. And so, that's an example of, maybe we think of EPA as a villain, but there are individuals within that system that really look to us to put pressure on them, because then that gives them a way to work on issues we care about. Because I'll tell you, the industry is there knocking on their door every day. And as an example, we went to the Office of Children's Health, and then we went over to the Office of Pesticide Programs, and I've never seen so much security in my entire life. I mean, we had to be vetted for practically an hour to get in the room, and then they were just like, "Well, we're really glad that you came in here. We don't really talk to people like you very often." And I'm thinking, yeah, I know who you're probably talking to on a daily basis. So, that's an example. You guys have any other fill-in to greatness? I think it's a good question.
Well, one thing that gives me a little optimism, and to answer part of your question is, okay, forget the optimism. Don't vote for the candidate for optimism. That's phony. That's phony. Anyway, is this Save America's Pollinators Act? I've been following the FIFRA for a long time, and that is the law I believe Mr. Kimbrell referred to as not an environmental law. So you have this Save America's Pollinators Act. It is intended to reverse the decisions of EPA to allow the neonics to be sold in the United States. And what is an example of some hope, rather than optimism, is that that we have members of both political parties on the bill. And that is fairly rare in this Congress. It's fairly polarized between members of the majority and minority political parties. So to me, when we have a representative from eastern Tennessee that is a Republican member of the House of Representatives and has a fairly low League of Conservation Voters score that might receive some vilifying comments from me in the hallway or something, I get a little more hopeful, nearly optimistic that we would be reaching out literally across the aisle and getting majority members to say, well, they're getting calls from their farmers, they're getting calls from their backyard gardeners, they're getting calls from people, and believe it or not, they do eat food. And believe it or not, they live their lives much like the way we live our lives. And so, to me, the idea that when you're strategic about your legislation, which I believe Representative Blumenauer from right here in the Oregon's 3rd District, and Congressman Conyers from Detroit, who's the main sponsor of the bill, but also, the Republican members that are going on this bill, even though they are recipients of some fairly deep, dark industrial money in their political campaigns, they're coming on this bill. And to me, if we cross the 10, 15% threshold of co-sponsors on this bill, we may well get a hearing. And that may lead to increased media attention. And hey, if Europe's doing this, why aren't we doing this? Really? Why aren't we doing this? And I think it's a great example of the leadership of the nonprofits in this room that are getting behind this bill.
Yeah, we have 58 co-sponsors, and word that we're likely to get a hearing, hopefully. Hopefully.
She's optimistic.
Yes. But we don't want to do nothing. There's a question over there. And also hopeful is we have a great band they're setting up over here, so we'll get to enjoy that too.
Okay, so let me wrap my brain around all of this. This is so intense and so great. So for the people wanting to be Gandhi, is us. And so you guys have thanked us. I am the young person who wants to use less and farm more because my grandparents did it, and it is a gut feeling. And you said we're not doing it alone, and so you've inspired me from Oklahoma, little Okie here, to go back and find the people who don't know what you guys have done here. So thank you for sending us all out to do what you guys have organized so greatly. And I'm really excited, and I just wanted to say thank you in front of everybody.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Dr. Kirschenman for the handout and recommended reading in here. I'm sure that everybody in here has another 10 books I'd like to add. And with greatest humility, I would like to just add one to this. Around the issue of coming together and crossing aisles, et cetera, Be Democracy by Thomas Seeley tells a story of basically the professional grandchild of von Frisch, who was the guy that figured out the bee dance. And his teacher was Lindauer, who was a very observant entomologist, who discovered in swarming bees, there were dirty bees doing a dance on the outside of the swarm. And it took 47 years for von Frisch to start to understand the communication that is inherent in the capabilities of the superorganism of the beehive. And that, there's the apocryphal story which historians of Einsteinia say is never been verified, that Einstein said if the bees are gone within 4 years, humans will be gone. That story doesn't need to be true. But the story told of the way in which the superorganism of the beehive communicates and comes to a decision about their new home, I think can be very instructive to all of us.
He's right. He's absolutely right. He's absolutely right about that.
As we reinvent a new home.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank this incredible program that you have, Beyond Pesticides, 32nd annual. Thank you for keeping it together. Thank you for continuing to educate the nation, the world, and I would like this to be a group of thousands. I had no idea what size conference I'd be showing up to, but just so nice to be here with all of you experts, and thank you so much. I was lucky to be sponsored to come here on behalf of a group called the Shaka Movement. We're very young. We just got started about 6 months ago. We're in Maui County. We're doing the first ever initiative in Maui County, Citizens Initiative, to get a temporary moratorium on the growing and research of genetically engineered organisms in Maui County. And we just, in 6 weeks, got all the 8,500 signatures. Actually, we have about 11,000 signatures that we needed to get on the ballot. It's in the process of being verified. We'll have more signatures. So just made it over that first hurdle. We've got a big crunch to make sure that we don't get preempted by the state laws that are bills that are trying to get a hold of our county before we get a hold of it ourselves. So that's the next immediate battle. But in November is our election, and so our next big push is educating the populace. I'm here to gather as much information as I can. And we're going to need help, and hopefully if we pull it off, we can be an example to the world and for other counties to take back control of the environment that they live in so that they can steward it back to health, so we can steward it back to health. It's just so scary going up against Monsanto. I just have to say, I'm shaking in my boots. And it's like, but at the same time, it's like I've just like thrown that line out to the future generations, and it's like I can't not do it. So we'll see how it goes, but we're going to need all your help. And so check out shakamovement.org. We have an amazing website with loads and loads of information. If you have any tools or the stuff that you think would be valuable for our fight, we would be so appreciative for that. And I'm really seeing it's building those coalitions with those other, we're a very multicultural society in Hawaii. We have Filipinos and Japanese and Koreans and Chinese and Haole people, but we all kind of stick to ourselves. And we're good at preaching to the choir, and we really need to reach across the aisle to the mostly Filipino farm workers, and so we're going to need help there too. So thank you. Beautiful conference. Keep it up.
I might just add too, just a note. I know Ann Golden is in the room here. Maybe you should raise your hand, Ann. But in Jackson County, Oregon, as some of you folks may have heard, on May 20th, there's going to be an election, the Our Family Farms measure, or the Family Farm measure, to protect Jackson County, Oregon, which is another big seed-producing region, hotbed of organic agriculture. They've got well over 150 family farmers signed on, which will protect the county from genetically engineered crops. And it's the one county that's going to be able to have this vote in Oregon due to some legislative action last year that led to the task force that I was on. But if you happen to have $25 or $50 or more and you've got your checkbook, I would definitely recommend talking with Ann back there, because they're in the fight of their lives, and it's going to send a national message depending on what happens in that election. It's fundraising records down there have been shattered by the out-of-state corporations, but the incredible grassroots movement they have down there is really powerful and exciting to see. So, I just wanted to give a shout out to Ann back there.
I probably don't need a mic. I just wanted to ask, what do you do with that genetically modified crops that you found here that were unlicensed, that showed up? What do you do with that? Because I heard in other countries they just burn it. What do you do here?
Well, I guess it sort of depends. I mean, there was the very well-known or well-publicized wheat scare that we had in Oregon last year. And ultimately what happened is the markets were on hold and people were losing money. And ultimately a lot of testing was done and the markets resumed. But I think that, so I'm not aware of anything having been destroyed as a result of that directly, at least stuff that was in the grain elevators. But that was ultimately that was ultimately sold. But and that's, I think what happened was there was a lot of testing. The markets were shut down for months, and there's a lot of feeling that if that happens again, our $500 million weed industry here in Oregon could just be down the drain. Yep. So what you definitely hear from farmers who produce seed in Oregon is, they're quite often their products are rendered unsellable, and they literally have to do what you said, which is destroy it, maybe plow a crop in the ground before it goes to seed, et cetera. So it's a real economic risk, and that's a big reason why we're involved in the issue, is the economic risk to farmers from sort of the lack of transparency and the lack of meaningful oversight at the federal and state level of these GE crops.
And Miguel wanted me to announce that the Biosafety Alliance is having a meeting down in Ashland. 5 presentations, 75? 5. Bilingual scientists and speakers on issues and solutions to genetically engineered crops on April 14th, 4 to 7 p.m. at the Standing Stone Brewery in Ashland.
So we are going to Ashland in Medford to have these presentations, and we are bringing Adelita San Vicente from Mexico. I don't know if you have heard about Adelita San Vicente. She's the leader of a movement that is called Sin Maíz No Hay País. They have 300 organizations, and they raised a class action lawsuit in Mexico in October last year, and a federal judge imposed a moratorium on GMO in commercial or pilot or experimental cultivation of GMO corn. So now we have this moratorium in Mexico, are 700 varieties of corn, and I am bringing Adelita San Vicente to support what's going on in Jackson County with the 15119, and also Ignacio Chapela. Maybe you know Ignacio Chapela from Berkeley, and Remy Van Dam from France. They put the ban in soy in Yucatan because Yucatan state is the 6th most important exporter of honey in the world, and there was the colony collapse disorder and all this stuff. Like Poland, the beekeepers, they were the one who pushed for the ban, and the same happened in Campeche also. They banned the GMO soy. So if anyone is from Jackson County, you can ask Ann, or you can ask me about more information, but I think you should support Ann. If you want to support something next week, next 2 weeks is the May 20 election. If we win the ban of GMO in Jackson County, we're going to win in Oregon, the leveling. So we have to win first there. So.
I just want to say how much I've appreciated being here and feeling a sense of help and community in moving ahead. I brought Zen and Megan from Hawaii and from California up here and helped start the Shaka movement, and so I feel really gratified and meeting and talking at length with Paul. We learned about this whole thing that we've got to run and do over in Hawaii to try to preserve that Shaka movement. And so I just wanted to say that it was really inspirational. And also, if you would like to have someday a retreat or a vacation in my certified organic farm and eco retreat center, I give lots of special, we run groups there and individuals and
Beyond
families.
pesticides.
I could host the whole thing. I could host the whole thing, and we're in the place where the trade winds come over the ocean and all the pesticides are on the other side of the island. where the tourists are. So I just welcome you to Haleakua Garden Farm, and I give special rates. Special rates. I do.
Yeah, I'm just getting optimism, not hope.
As one of the early speakers said, he wasn't a politician, he was a connector. Well, I'm not a politician, but I am a connector. And I just love this conference. And it's amazing to me how much information is out there, and there's always more to learn. But some hopeful things that I have read recently, and I've only gotten into bees since December, but University of California had a very, in Davis, had a very successful bee program, and it got decimated. Well, they're reactivating it. And one of the most recent articles that got published in their blog was a research project that was from University of Michigan, where they convinced farmers to put in hedgerows of native plantings. And within 3 years, the native bee population increased so much. The blueberries, they planted them around blueberry crops, the blueberries got bigger, were more productive, and basically higher yields for the farmers. So they basically paid for it within 3 years and no pesticides. So that was a really hopeful thing that I read. And also the other thing for Northern California, I went to a recent Sacramento Beekeepers Association meeting, and the guy that was presenting was a queen rearer. He only loses 8% of his hives a year. He considers Northern California to be some of the best beekeepers in the world, and when colony collapse order came around, he says instead of infighting with each other, he says we just all got together and said what works. And they started with some stuff that has really helped the whole region to get through this whole thing. So that's Northern California beekeepers.
Well, thank you, everybody. I am getting ready to gavel the 32nd National Pesticide Forum to a close without any objections. Have a great evening, everybody. We have some organic beverage out here, and thank you to the musicians who are going to enlighten us further. Thank you.